Airlines, known as the safest vehicles in the sky. But sometimes, a few seconds of error, an unseen negligence, or an unnoticed signal can bury hundreds of lives in darkness. In this video, you will descend into the darkest moments of the sky, witnessing times when technology failed and human error led to disaster. But remember this, after watching this video, you may never sit in that seat with the same sense of safety again. August 12th, 1985. A routine domestic flight from Tokyo to Osaka, Japan. Japan Airlines Flight 123. Exactly 524 people are on board. Families, business people, students, children. Time, 6:12 p.m. The Boeing 747 takes off successfully. Everything starts as an ordinary flight, but just 12 minutes later, something terrible happens. At an altitude of 24,000 feet, a loud explosion is heard. Cabin pressure drops instantly. The aircraft begins to shake uncontrollably. Severe damage occurs in the tail section, and worst of all, the hydraulic system completely fails. In other words, the aircraft can no longer be controlled. A jumbo jet drifting helplessly through the sky. But the pilots begin a miraculous struggle. For 32 minutes, they try to keep the plane airborne, using only engine power. Radio communications are filled with despair. No control. We can't steer. We've lost everything. The plane dips, climbs, sways again. Passengers scream. Oxygen masks dangle in the cabin. The captain makes a final effort to land in a mountainous area, but it's not enough. Time, 6:56 p.m. The plane crashes into the Takamagahara Mountains in Japan. A massive explosion. Flames. 520 people lose their lives. Only 4 passengers survive. 4 people survive a giant catastrophe. So how did this happen? The investigation reveals that the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead had been weakened years earlier due to a faulty repair. And that mistake was like a time bomb. Japan Airlines 123 wasn't just a flight. It was a tragic intersection of errors, negligence, and human endurance. March 8, 2014, Kuala Lumpur International Airport. At 12:41 a.m. local time, a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777, operating as MH370, takes off with 227 passengers and 12 crew bound for Beijing. Everything seems fine until 40 minutes later. At 1:19 a.m., the final message is received.
Good night, Malaysia, 370.
And the plane vanishes from radar. No signal, no contact, no crash report, as if it vanished from the sky. While flying over the South China Sea, the plane suddenly changes course. No one knows why. Later, military radar tracks it over the Malaysian peninsula, then heading toward the Indian Ocean. But after that, nothing but mystery. The plane may have flown for hours, but to where and why? The search becomes the largest in history. 26 countries scan thousands of kilometers of ocean, but the result? No trace. Months later, a few debris pieces believed to be from the aircraft are found on islands in the Indian Ocean. But even these fragments can't explain what truly happened. And the most critical question lingers. Why did MH370 deviate from its route? What happened in the cockpit? Was it just a technical failure or a deliberate act? Some theories suggest the captain hijacked the plane intentionally. Others believe technical malfunctions and cascading system errors caused the disaster. There are even theories about external interference or covert operations. But the truth is, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared into the depths of the ocean with 239 lives. And even more than a decade later, the world still lives with unanswered questions about that flight. May 31st, 2009. Air France Flight 447, an Airbus A330, takes off from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Destination, Paris. There are 228 people on board, a night flight. Everything is routine. The pilots engage the autopilot. Cabin lights dim. Passengers begin to fall asleep, but no one knows. This flight will never reach its destination. 3 hours later, the aircraft disappears. Last position, the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No emergency call. No signal. Just like MH370, as if erased from the sky, France and Brazil launch a massive search operation. But the ocean is like a curtain of secrets. Even the wreckage is nowhere to be found. Families wait for days, but hope slowly fades. And finally, exactly 2 years later, in 2011, deep-sea robots find the wreckage 4,000 meters below the surface. The black box is also recovered, and the tension peaks here. The cause wasn't a technical failure. It was human error. That night, the aircraft enters a storm zone at high altitude. The pitot tubes, the speed sensors, freeze and malfunction. The autopilot disengages. Then a horrific chain of errors begins. The co-pilot pulls the nose of the plane upward, but this is deadly, because lifting the nose cuts off airflow. The aircraft enters a stall, meaning it can no longer glide and begins to fall. By the time the captain returns to the cockpit, it's too late. The aircraft crashes into the dark waters of the Atlantic at 200 kilometers per hour. 228 lives, no survivors. This incident showed the world even the most advanced aircraft is vulnerable to human error. And sometimes, on a dark night, beneath the stars, even technology may not be enough. June 23, 1985. A giant Boeing 747 departs from Toronto, Canada, en route to New Delhi, India. Air India Flight 182. There are 329 people on board. Most are Canadian citizens of Indian descent. Families, holidays, hopes, joys, but none of them know. Minutes later, above the Atlantic Ocean, the sky will turn into hell. As the plane cruises at 31,000 feet near Ireland, suddenly, a massive explosion. A giant fireball lights up the sky. The aircraft breaks apart, and all 329 people perish. At that moment, there's no contact with the tower, no distress call, because this wasn't an accident. This was a cold-blooded attack. A comprehensive investigation is launched. Debris is recovered from the Atlantic. And finally, the truth comes to light. A bomb hidden in the aircraft's luggage compartment. Yes, this was the deadliest aviation bombing in history at the time. Behind the attack was a radical separatist group seeking an independent Sikh state from India. They planted the bomb on the plane in Canada. But do you know what the most shocking detail was? Canadian intelligence had received warning signs about this attack days in advance. Some agents even predicted that this flight might be a target. Yet, no security measures were taken. No luggage screening was done. And this negligence cost 329 lives. This event shook not just India and Canada, but the entire world. International aviation security changed forever, but the lives lost never returned. Air India, Flight 182 is still remembered as one of the darkest marks of terrorism in the skies. May 25, 1979, Chicago O'Hare Airport. The weather is clear. One of the approaching planes, American Airlines Flight 191, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 carrying 271 passengers and crew. The plane is ready for takeoff to Los Angeles. But no one suspects the disaster about to unfold. Takeoff is cleared. The giant DC-10 begins speeding down the runway. Engines at full power. Final communication with the tower. Everything appears normal, but within seconds, everything falls apart. Just as the plane lifts off, the left engine suddenly detaches. Yes, the massive engine separates from the body. But worse, the detachment destroys the aircraft's hydraulic system and electrical connections. The pilots try to understand what's happening, but there's no time. The plane tilts sharply to the left. It loses altitude, and just 31 seconds later, it crashes near a hangar north of the airport, followed by a massive explosion. Flames rise into the sky. A tragedy etched in history. 271 people on board perish. 2 more die on the ground. a total of 273 lives lost. It becomes the deadliest aviation accident in U.S. history. The question is, how did this happen? The investigation lasts days, even weeks, and the result is shocking. The engine fell off due to a non-standard maintenance procedure by American Airlines. They had used a forklift to remove the engine together with the wing. This caused cracks in the mounting pin, eventually leading to detachment. The crash wasn't just a technical failure. A chain of negligence cost 273 lives, and that day left a permanent black mark in civil aviation history. March 27, 1977. The most unusual, most unexpected disaster in aviation history is about to unfold. Location: Tenerife Airport, Canary Islands, Spain. There was no heavy traffic throughout the day, but due to a bomb threat at another airport, 2 giant jumbo jets were diverted to Tenerife. Pan Am Flight 1736 and KLM Flight 4805. Both were on the runway, awaiting takeoff. Fog had begun to settle. Visibility dropped to near zero, and radio communication between the tower and pilots was messy, unclear, and confusing. What happened next felt like a movie, but it was real. The KLM pilot thinks he has takeoff clearance and starts accelerating down the runway at full power. But the Pan Am plane is still on the runway, and due to the fog, they can't see each other. The tower screams in panic. Pan Am pilot grabs the radio. Still on the runway, but the message comes too late. Too late. And then, suddenly, the sky ignites. The KLM plane crashes into the Pan Am aircraft at 290 kilometers per hour. The runway is filled with wreckage, burning fuel, and screams. A voice recorder captures the KLM captain saying only one thing at the moment of collision. Oh my God, 583 people die. It becomes the deadliest accident in aviation history. And do you know the cause? Miscommunication, misunderstanding, and haste. The captains were experienced. The aircraft were in top shape, but the human factor, ego, pressure, and communication failure cost 583 lives that day. The Tenerife disaster rewrote every rule in aviation. That day, it wasn't just 2 planes that collided. One of humanity's greatest lessons was written in blood on the runway. These 6 tragedies weren't just plane crashes. They were the bitter faces of human error, negligence, and fate. But each one made aviation safer. On your next flight, you're safe, because these disasters were never forgotten.